My father laughed, completely tearing a $5 million check in half right in front of the lawyer. My sister sneered and dropped hers into her black coffee. They called my late grandfather a worthless, destitute burden, thinking the checks were a pathetic final joke. I was the only one who carefully folded the cream-colored paper and slid it into my purse. They didn't know it was a psychological trap, designed with a brutal 24-hour deadline. And by treating his final gift like garbage, my family had just irrevocably handed me absolute control over a $42 million empire. To understand the sheer arrogance of my bloodline, you have to look at what I do for a living. I am 31 years old, and I work as a home health aide. Many people look at my profession and only see someone checking vitals or changing bandages for $18 an hour. But they don't see the dark underbelly of caregiving. We are the ones who witness the human decline that society desperately wants to hide. We deal with the smell of decay, the midnight panic, and the grueling physical toll of lifting bodies that can no longer support themselves. The state mandates that we document everything, every pill, every symptom, every single visit, because ink on paper is the only shield we have against terrible families looking for a scapegoat. I applied that exact meticulous care to my grandfather, Silas. For 3 years, I drove to his drafty 2-bedroom house in Tacoma every Tuesday and Thursday. I washed his clothes, I cooked his meals, I tracked his creeping arthritis, and I recorded his lonely days while my wealthy, status-obsessed family completely abandoned him. My father Greg ran an auto dealership and lived his life highly leveraged, always borrowing against tomorrow to pay for today. My mother Brenda stopped visiting Silas entirely because the scent of medicinal creams ruined her energy for her tennis club luncheons. My older brother Derek and my younger sister Vanessa only dialed his landline when their rent was due. They ignored Silas because they worshipped status and firmly believed he had none to offer them. He was just a retired factory worker with a fixed pension. Or so they thought. So when the lawyer slid those 5 cream-colored envelopes across the polished mahogany table, my family reacted exactly how they always did, with loud, blind entitlement. They ripped them up. I kept mine. The next morning at 9 o'clock sharp, the rain from the day before had stopped, leaving the Seattle pavement slick. I drove my 10-year-old car into the parking lot of the Washington Fidelity Bank on 4th Avenue. I walked up to the branch manager, David Lyonis, a man who prided himself on unflappable corporate professionalism. I sat down and unclasped my purse. I told him my grandfather had passed away and I only wanted him to verify the routing number, because as a home health aide, I simply could not afford a $30 bounce check fee if this was some sort of cruel prank. David typed the 9-digit routing number into his terminal system. I watched the reflection of the monitor on his rectangular glasses. He hit the enter key. When the page loaded, David stopped breathing. I do not mean he gasped. I mean his chest completely froze. The color drained from his skin so fast he looked physically ill. He stood up so abruptly his office chair rolled backward and hit a filing cabinet. He rushed me into a windowless back office, turned the heavy deadbolt lock, and explained the terrifying reality of what my family had just done. The routing number did not go to a standard checking account. It traced directly to a corporate blind trust established in 1998. The funds were real. Silas was a ghost investor who quietly bought up parcels of land in Bellevue just before the tech boom hit, leasing out ground rights to tech billionaires while he sat on his rotting porch drinking store-brand tea. But there was a highly specific secondary clause attached to the transfer instructions. It was a 24-hour viability test. The checks had to be presented to a banking institution in their original physical condition, within exactly 24 hours of the estate reading. In trust law, a viability test isn't just administrative, it's behavioral psychology. Silas knew his greedy children lacked the patience to read the fine print. By making the checks look simple, he used their own arrogance to filter them out. The manager told me that because my family physically destroyed their checks, their shares were instantly and permanently forfeited. The system had just finalized the consolidation. Glowing green on his screen. $42 million in liquid assets, holding companies and commercial real estate deeds. And I was now the sole executive and beneficiary. It took exactly 4 days for the shockwave to hit. My father tried to use his ripped-up check to secure a massive corporate loan extension for his failing dealership, only to be told by his loan officer that the funds had defaulted. He had zero collateral, and he had triggered his own financial ruin. The panic was instantaneous. The realization of what they had thrown away tore through their homes, shattering their fragile egos. They needed a target, and for 31 years I had been their designated punching bag. Greg and my older brother Derek stormed into the luxury assisted living facility, where I was scheduled to work. They didn't care about the elderly residents reading the morning paper. They didn't care about the nurses watching them. Derek pointed a thick, callous finger directly at my face and called me a thief. Greg used his classic intimidation tactic, stepping deep into my personal space, looming over me to force me to look up. His face was flushed to a dangerous shade of purple, threatening to make sure I never worked in this city again if I didn't reverse the transfer. But do you know what is most exhausting about surviving psychological abuse? It isn't the shouting. It is the immense energy required to keep your face completely blank. I had spent thousands of hours training myself to not react to my father's tantrums. I had spent years de-escalating patients suffering from severe dementia who swing heavy canes at my head. I looked at him, kept my hands visible, dropped my voice to a cold, clinical tone and called him sir. I told him he needed to lower his voice and take a step back. That single word short-circuited his brain. He reached out to grab my arm, but the facility's security guard stepped between us, physically pushing my father backward toward the sliding doors. I didn't go to the bathroom to cry. I didn't call my lawyer in a panic. I walked out the back entrance to the staff parking lot and immediately dialed the non-emergency line for the Bellevue Police Department. I filed a formal report for harassment and attempted assault. I was building a barricade of bureaucracy around myself because I knew they operated in a world where loud aggression always won. When physical bullying failed, my sister Vanessa tried digital warfare. She was 24 years old and entirely consumed by the pursuit of internet fame. She uploaded a crying video to her followers, accusing me of elder abuse and stealing the fortune. She wore a simple gray sweatshirt to appear relatable, letting her mascara run down her cheeks. She painted herself as the heartbroken granddaughter fighting for justice against a calculating medical professional. The internet responded exactly how she intended. The comments section turned into a digital firing squad, with strangers calling for my nursing license to be revoked. But Vanessa possessed a fatal combination of intense vanity and profound stupidity. To prove her lies, she reached into her passenger seat and held up a piece of paper to the camera. She didn't understand what she was holding. It was a restricted financial disclosure form generated during the early stages of the probate litigation, placed under a strict judicial gag order by a federal judge. Federal judges view gag order violations as a direct attack on the integrity of the judicial process. My lawyer didn't waste time arguing with an internet mob. He filed an emergency motion for contempt of court. The judge reviewed the video footage in chambers. Her video was wiped from the servers in hours, her comment section vanished, and she was slapped with a federal summons demanding her presence at an emergency contempt hearing. She had tried to burn my life to the ground and ended up setting her own feet on fire. They were completely out of dirty tricks and public stunts. The final battleground was a formal legal deposition on the 40th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise. Greg filed a lawsuit officially accusing me of undue influence. He brought his own lawyer to the vast, intimidating conference room. Under oath, under penalty of perjury, Greg played the devoted son. He claimed he visited the Tacoma house every single Sunday afternoon without fail. He built a narrative of a loyal son protecting a vulnerable patriarch. Then he pointed a finger across the table at me. He accused me of over-medicating Silas with heavy narcotics to keep him in a perpetual fog, claiming I manipulated a confused old man into signing away the estate. Why would he commit perjury so easily on the public record? In behavioral psychology, it is called narcissistic delusion. Abusers manipulate reality so often in their living rooms, they foolishly believe they can manipulate a federal courtroom. The stenographer typed every single venomous word. But my lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, didn't argue. He just opened a black binder. He produced an independent geriatric psychiatric evaluation required by the wealth management firm 6 months prior to the trust amendments. The medical report explicitly stated Silas possessed an intelligence quotient of 135, exceptional memory recall, sharp executive function, and 0 signs of pharmaceutical sedation. Greg shifted in his chair, the charm evaporating from his face. Then, Caldwell dropped the heavy hammer. He slid a stack of subpoenaed telecommunications records across the polished wood. He traced my father's movements for the last 2 years. The cell tower data showed Greg's phone pinging towers near his auto dealership and his Bellevue Country Club every single Sunday afternoon. His device did not register a single ping within the Tacoma city limits for 14 consecutive months. And finally, Caldwell presented my certified, carbon-copied medical logs, page after page, year after year, meticulously detailing every unanswered phone call, every broken promise, and every missed holiday. Greg's lies were crushed under the sheer, silent weight of empirical data. The judge was absolutely furious. She stated she had rarely seen a claim of undue influence so exhaustively disproven. She dismissed their lawsuit with prejudice, permanently welding the legal door shut. Because the lawsuit was filed in bad faith and relied upon perjured testimony, she ordered Greg, Derek, and Vanessa to pay 100% of my legal defense fees. But Silas was a man who built airplane wing flaps for 30 years. He understood that every complex machine required fail-safes and redundant locks. He had one final, devastating twist waiting. For a decade, my father and brother survived bankruptcy because an anonymous holding company called Evergreen Ventures kept buying their toxic debt. They thought they were self-made titans of local industry. They thought they were business geniuses who naturally attracted private equity. But Silas was Evergreen Ventures. He funded the illusion of their success. He subsidized the very pride they used to belittle him. When the master trust transferred to me, I became their primary creditor. To secure those millions of dollars in bailouts, my father had secretly collateralized his auto dealership and the family's luxury 5-bedroom home in Bellevue. In his final will, Silas stipulated a conditional debt forgiveness protocol. If Greg simply deposited the $5 million check, it would have wiped the ledger clean and returned the deeds free and clear. But because they laughed, because they mocked his memory and physically destroyed the checks, the forgiveness protocol was permanently nullified. The grace periods had expired. The principal balances were now due in full to me. My family always confused luxury with power. They thought power was a loud voice, an expensive tailored suit, and a leased heavy-duty truck. But true power is controlling the chain of consequences. I didn't scream. I didn't send the county sheriff to force my parents out onto the sidewalk to humiliate them. That is what my father would have done. I authorized the bank to foreclose on the failing businesses. The tow trucks reclaimed my brother's equipment, and transport haulers emptied my father's car lot in the middle of the night. And for the house, I hired a ruthless corporate property management firm in downtown Seattle. They sent my parents a standard Washington state residential lease agreement. My parents are now classified as tenants at will, in their own home, paying fair market rent directly to a corporate portal controlled by my trust. If they miss a payment by 5 days, the system initiates automatic eviction proceedings. I do not take their calls. Our entire relationship is reduced to a digital rent receipt generated 12 times a year. I quit my grueling agency job. I handed in my identification badge. But Silas didn't leave me his fortune so I could sit on a beach and drink cocktails. He left it to me because he knew I understood the actual value of human care. I spent 6 months scouting commercial real estate, and I used the capital to buy a stunning mid-century building on a high bluff in Edmonds. I gutted the interior and transformed the empty shell into a state-of-the-art nonprofit elder care clinic. We built wide, accessible hallways, private rooms filled with natural light, and physical therapy rooms looking out over the coastline. But the architecture is not what makes it special. I remembered the aching feet and the quiet daily desperation of trying to survive on $18 an hour. I doubled the state average starting wage for every single nurse and personal care aide in my clinic. I instituted mandatory paid time off and strict patient-to-staff ratios, ensuring they never have to worry about grocery bills while doing the hardest work on earth. When you pay people what they are actually worth, they do not just show up to clock in and clock out. They show up to heal. Sometimes you cannot heal a toxic family by shrinking yourself to fit their demands. My family spent their entire lives screaming demands at the people around them, expecting the universe to simply submit to their volume. They learned far too late that true power does not need to raise its voice. Sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to let the system do its job, and build a boundary made of ironclad consequences. It is Tuesday morning now. I am sitting on the wide wooden deck that wraps around the back of the clinic. Out on the water, the white ferries are cutting across the Puget Sound. My parents still live in their Bellevue house, and on the first of every month, my property manager collects their rent. I do not feel anger anymore. Just the calm, steady, predictable rhythm of the tides. Disclaimer: this video is created for the sole purpose of entertainment. All situations, characters, and stories in this video are fictional and are built entirely using artificial intelligence technology. We hope you have a relaxing time.